Most painting tutorials teach you where to put each color. This isn't one of these typical videos. Today I'm going to show you how I finish a miniature, because once you understand the workflow behind Angron, you can almost paint every Khorne Daemon that same way. Bloodthirster, Skarbrand, or Bloodletters, or the Greater Demon of Khorne. Even your entire army follows exactly the same process. This isn't about becoming the world's best painter. This is about building a system that gets your miniatures from grey blister boxes to something you genuinely can be proud of. So before we begin, one quick thing. If you haven't watched my demon skin tutorial, please do so. I won't repeat the skin recipe in this video, because that's exactly the same process across almost every Khorne Daemon. Instead, today we're focusing on something much more important. How all those individual painting steps come together to finish an entire centerpiece miniature. Step number 1, what is actually step number 2, but in this video it's step number 1. Does that make sense? Yeah! Anyway, so first step, of course, we're gonna paint the wings. For the base coat here, I'm using Abaddon Black. Once this one is dry, I start building up texture using a series of Drybrush layers. These colors are Dawnstone from Games Workshop and Administrative Grey. The exact paints aren't that important here. The key is simply to work from a dark base coat towards grey to progressively light the grey tones. If you're using scale 75 colors, their greys are much more matte, which gives the wings a slightly darker, more realistic appearance. If you prefer Citadel paints, that's absolutely fine as well. They create a slightly brighter finish. Both approaches work, so use whichever paint range you enjoy. Step 3. Horns, claw and teeth. Once the wings are complete, it's time to paint everything. So speaking about all the natural bones that grow on Angron. For all of these, I'm using Skavenblight Dinge as a base coat, and I'm gonna go for 2 very thin coats of it. After that, I'm gonna shade everything in Nuln Oil. Then I'm gonna dry brush everything with Starworm in Fur and a small portion of Carrick Stone. You can leave the miniature there, it's already fine, but I go a step further and add a very light dry brush of Racket Flesh, but only on the very tips. This final highlight gives the horns a much sharper, more natural look and helps to define the edges. One thing I almost forgot is the fur. Reason for this is that it's so simple to paint. Just base coat all the fur parts in Abaddon Black, then give them an edge highlight with Skavenblight Dinge, and after that a fine layer with Thornworm in Fur from Citadel paints. Step number 4, the bronze armor. But between you and me, I cheated here a little bit, because once I was painting the skin, I did already base coat the armor parts. That gives us the advantage that we don't have, hence the skin is finished already, as same as the horn, claws and teeth. We don't now have to base coat all the golden stuff with a bigger brush on the mini, what could be a little messy. So we now correct all the Balthasar gold first. There was the base coat for the armor. Then we're gonna shade the whole armor with Agrex's Earthshade from Citadel as well. And then we have 2 dry brush steps. What is Balthasar gold and a fine detail highlight with golden griffin. The golden griffin adds a really nice warm metallic highlight and helps bring the armor to life. So one thing I also do is adding a little bit more age and character. To make the bronze look a little bit older and more realistic, I apply a little layer of Nelac oxide into selected recesses and details. Very important thing here, don't overdo it. Less is more, because this creates the appearance oxidized bronze and copper. As said, don't cover the entire armor. Less is more. Focus a little bit on areas where dirt and moisture would collect naturally. I think that's the best way to explain it. Step 5, the silver details. So some parts of the armor are rather steel than bronze, right? For those areas I use the base coat of lead belcher, shade everything with Nuln Oil, and then give a little edge highlight, again with lead belcher. The goal isn't really to make the silver brighter here, it's to give depth first. The Nuln Oil settles into the recesses, while the final highlight restores the metallic shine on the edges. And this is something I generally recommend through miniature painting. A lot of people paint metallics with contrast paint because it's quick. And that's perfectly fine if speed is your priority. Personally though, I still prefer the classic way. Base coat, shade, highlight, highlight. It's the same technique we used on the skin, and it creates much more richer and deeper shadows, and a much more deeper sense of depth across your entire model. But this again is just my personal opinion. Step number 6, leather, straps and cloth. Next we paint all the leather details, including the straps and the torn leather pieces, hanging from Angron's armor. For these I use the following recipe: scale 57 black, and then I'm gonna go for an edge highlight of Skaven bleached dinge, and the final layer I made with Administratum Grey. One really important note here, don't use a wash. Scale 75 paints have a very matte finish, and applying Nuln Oil over them tends to make the surface look really messy. In this case, a clean edge highlight creates a much more convincing leather effect than adding extra shading. Finally, paint all of the small metal studs and rivets on the leather. You can simply pick them out with lead belcher, how I did, or any other silver tone that you prefer. These tiny metallic details don't take that long, but they add a lot of contrast and help to break up the leather surfaces, making the model feel much more detailed. Step number 7, weapons. I deliberately leave the weapons until the very end. The reason though is pretty simple. By this stage, all of the surrounding armor and details are already finished. So you can focus entirely on the weapons without worrying about accidentally getting metallic paint onto other parts of the model. For the axe I started with following base colors. For the steel and the chains I used lead belcher. For the leather straps on the grip I used scale black ST00, and for the cutting edge of the axe I used again Balthasar Gold. From here I painted the metallics exactly the same way as the armor. That means shading the silver parts with Nuln Oil and the bronze parts with Agris Earthshade. Restore the metallic finish with lead belcher on the erased areas or Balthasar Gold. And of course highlight where needed. Once everything was finished on the axe, I added a little bit of Nelac oxide around the skulls and selected details to give the axe an aged, weathered appearance. You also can thin down Nelac oxide if you want to progress this color slow like I did. Finally, I applied Blood for the Blood God on some few strategic places. I don't recommend to overdo this. Do just enough to make the weapon, how to say, feel like it actually has seen battle. Next step is the sword. The sword follows the same metallic process, but the blade has one special effect: the burning molten fire skulls inside the blade. This effect I created almost entirely with dry brushing, slowly building up each color. The order is as follows: 2 light base coats of white, a very bright yellow, an orange that really looks orange, a very deep rich red, and then a small portion of dry brush with black. The colors I used here on my model were Vallejo Primer, the white one, obviously, Flash Kids Yellow from Citadel, Fire Orange from Vallejo, Mephiston Red, and then Abaddon Black, both from Citadel paints. The most important part here is to build the effect gradually. Use a very light pressure with the dry brush and let each color blend in naturally into the previous one. Don't try to cover the entire blade with every color. Each layer should become slightly smaller, creating the illusion of intense heat at the center and darker cooling metal towards the edges. Once the whole effect is complete, apply 2 coats of non-oil on the plate, not where we added the fire. This softens the transitions between the colors and blends in the glowing fire into the metallic steel, creating a much more convincing molten effect. Last but not least, we have small fine details on both weapons. The small hoses and cables attached to the weapons can be painted in any color you like. There isn't a right or wrong choice here. Just take any color that complements the rest of the model or adds small points of contrast. Step number 8, the base. So for a centerpiece model like Angron, the base is as important as the mini itself. So I personally believe he's not supposed to look like any other regular infantry model standing on a flat base. When someone sees him on tabletop, they should immediately recognize that this is the centerpiece of an entire army. The first thing I did was creating height to the base. I built up the terrain using pieces of cork, layering them until the base was roughly 1 centimeter taller than the original one. This simple step adds a huge amount of presence to the finished model. Next, I covered the cork with muddy terrain texture paste from SolidWorks. You can use almost any modeling paste for this. I only used muddy terrain because I already had it at home. And yes, before Dr. Paint complains, I know there are better products available. But the important point is the exact brand doesn't matter. Almost any texture paint will work with that technique. Just don't use only cork because it only will look like painted cork. While the paste was still wet, I sprinkled a fine gravel from a model scenery kit across the whole surface. To create more variety, I also mixed in SolidWorks dry soil. This texture paint dries with natural cracks, giving the impression of dry, broken earth. By combining these two textures, the base feels much more natural than using only one product. Leave now everything to dry for at least 24 hours. Once the texture had fully cured, I primed first the entire model black and made all the steps you saw until now. The ground then gets 2 solid coats of Carrick stone. And now comes the most important part. Don't apply Acrylic Earthshade as a normal wash. Absolutely flood the base with this. The goal is to let it pull into the recesses and create extremely dark shadows. Don't even worry if it runs into the cracks or down the side on the terrain. That actually will help the final result. As Dr. Paint probably would say, the difference between a wash and the dunk is about 2 liters of Acrylic Earthshade. Probably yes. The reason for this is simple. We want the desert to look dry, dark and corrupted, like a battlefield in the Chaos Wastes, not like a bright holiday beach. Those shadows create far more atmosphere than a clean, sandy finish. Once everything was dry, I added vegetation using GameCrest products. I used a mixture of grass tufts and plants to break up the rocky ground, give the base a little bit more visual interest without making it feel alive or lush. Step 9. Final check. Before we call the miniature finished, we have to do a final quality check. Technically, the base is still missing one last step, painting the black rim to create a clean finish. But before doing that, I inspect the entire miniature one more time. And also, and this is something very personal, does the overall color balance feel right? Working this way keeps the process organized. It prevents mistakes and makes a large project like Angron is much more manageable. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and it helps you paint your Angron. And now we're gonna take a look at the finished model itself. Let's go. If this video helped you, let me know which miniature you'd like me to paint next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers. Bye bye.